Good morning, children. In today's class, we are going to see the format and specimen of cash flow statement according to indirect method, and this is the format which I have clicked from your textbook itself. So first of all, you should take care that how to draw the format. The format includes two column particulars and amount. But I will suggest you take one more amount column inside here. So you make three columns particulars, then one amount column and the final amount column outside. This is the main amount column in which we will be doing the total of our cash flow statement, and there will be some places where we will write the amount inside here. So take two amount columns. Now this is a big format, children. According to our textbook, cash flow statement is a big format. If you remember, last year we have done a chapter final account that also had a big format of trading and profit and loss account. So this is same way a format which is very different and it has never come up in any of the chapter like this. What I'm going to tell you today is the areas which we should be very carefully taking care of while doing our numericals. We have discussed what is operating activity in our previous class. We have discussed in investing activity and also talked about financing activities. In our yesterday's online class, all discussion were completed. Now, let us come to the beginning of this format, and once again I'm telling you that this cash flow statement is made under indirect method. So the heading goes cash flow statement for the year ended. The current year date will be written here when it is ending, and this is always according to accounting standard 3 revise. So heading is important. Now, the first thing you should take care is to write the subheading particulars and, as I told you, two amount columns. Roman 1, children, please take care. This is Roman 1, cash flow from operating activities. So, your cash flow statement start with first activity called operating activity, and you have to compulsorily give this heading in your statement. It has to be written before you write anything else. Now I'll show you this entire area is operating activity till we reach the final amount, and that is coming somewhere here on point number J. This is the final amount of operating activity here. This is operating activity. So that entire area works for operating activity. Then comes Roman 2, cash flow from investing activities. So anything related with non-current assets and non-current investments will always be a part of investing activities. This we have already discussed in our online class yesterday. So Roman 2 is cash flow from investing activity. So first was operating, second is investing. Until here, when you reach this final amount here, it is the amount of investing activity according to our calculation. Then comes our third activity called cash flow from financing activities. So, as we have discussed in our online class, any increase and decrease in the equity share capital, preference share capital, debentures, long-term loans and borrowings, interest paid on borrowings, dividend paid on shares is a part of financing activities. So, in cash flow statement, financing activity is the third activity to be represented. The order is fixed: operating, investing, and financing. Now, after doing all these calculations here, the final amount of financing activity is written here. This is the final amount of financing activity. And 1, 2, 3 completed. Heading 4 says net increase slash decrease in cash and cash equivalents from 1 plus 2 plus 3. I repeat, point number 4, Roman 4, net increase slash decrease in cash and cash equivalents from 1 plus 2 plus 3. That means from operating activity, investing activities, and financing activities. We will add these three activities and write it here after drawing a line above this. We will do the total of three activities and write it here. Now, what is this increase and decrease? Increase means your amount coming here finally, the total is positive figure. That is the meaning of word increase. And if this amount is a negative figure, it is in minus, you will use the word decrease. So one of the two. Both cannot come. Either it will be net increase or it may be net decrease in cash and cash equivalents from the sum of three activities. I hope this is clear. Now come point number 5. Point number 5 is to add cash and cash equivalents in the beginning of the year. Children, beginning of the year means previous year. Let us be very clear with it. Beginning of the year means previous year. In your question, there will be 2 years figure. So you'll take the previous year figure because that is the opening balance of cash and cash equivalent in the current year. So these are the list we have already discussed for cash and cash equivalents. They may be in your question. You have to add them of the previous year amount, write them inside individually, then take the total outside. And finally, this cash and cash equivalent in the beginning of the year and the total of three activities. That means point number 4 and point number 5 will be added and that total will be written here outside. Correct? We will add it and write the total outside. And what will be this final amount? This will be closed with double line. This double line closing is very important. That means this is no more further taking into calculation. This final amount is actually point number 6, cash and cash equivalents at the end of the year. That means the current year. And here is where your cash flow statement gets completed. So I hope you have followed the instruction carefully. So we started with point number one, and then we are ending at point number 6. We may go up again and just give a look to it as per the subheading. So I'm just going to revise the subheading. Cash flow from operating activities. It will always start with net profit before tax and ordinary items. To start with, we can simply take net profit. This net profit will be the current year minus previous year profit, which will be coming from the question under the heading reserves and surplus in notes to account. I repeat, this net profit is the difference between current year and previous year. That means current year minus previous year amount of reserve and surplus given in a question in notes to account. Now, this first area, cash flow from operating activity, is the lengthiest area of our calculation because we have very specifically talked about investing and financing activities which relates to a particular area of balance sheet, but the maximum calculation goes under operating activity, and here also there are more subheads. So what is this point number A? Point number A is net profit. Then you should write here add non-operating and non-cash items. You see here non-cash and non-operating items. Here are the list of non-operating and non-cash items. One of them being depreciation, goodwill written off, interest on bank overdraft, interest on borrowings. So these are all non-operating and non-cash items which needs to be added back to the net profit. So if you have these headings in your question, you will write it inside in the first amount column which I've asked you to draw, and finally take the total outside and then add it to the net profit. This net profit plus all these non-cash items, non-operating items, final total together gives you another total here. Then we need to subtract, that means less items to be deducted. And what you should write here is non-operating incomes. These are non-operating incomes which needs to be deducted. You can see the example: interest income, dividend income, rental income, profit on sale of fixed assets, and decrease in provision for doubtful debts. These are non-operating income which should be written inside, then the final total outside, and from the previous total you will subtract this to arrive at very important step in your operating activity, which is known as operating profit before working capital changes. I repeat, operating profit before working capital changes is the first answer you should get under operating activity. Let's go back. We started with net profit. You may see net profit here. This amount comes from the question. After adding and subtracting non-operating items, non-cash items, and subtracting non-operating income, we arrive at first answer called operating profit before working capital changes. This is important to understand. Now comes the working for current assets and current liabilities. So if you see here, point number E, it says add. Now what is needed to be added? Any decrease in current assets or increase in current liability. How do we come to know increase and decrease? You have to compare the previous year amount of current assets and current liability from the current year. If current year there is an increase, that means current year minus previous year is the formula. If that is coming positive, that means it is increase. So increase in current liability is to be added and decrease in current assets is to be subtracted. So here are the list of current assets and liabilities. You are well aware of it because you have done the chapter accounting ratios and that you have studied current ratio. Then what is to be subtracted? Less increase in current asset and decrease in current liability, just the opposite of the previous one. If any asset is increasing, you have to subtract. If any liability is decreasing, you have to subtract. So those list of addition and subtraction items will be inside in the first amount column, and after adjusting this plus and minus figure, these add figures and these less figures, the final amount will be written outside, and this will be adjusted with operating profit before working capital changes. Operating profit before working capital changes is point number D. You can see here point number D. Then E is about decrease in current assets and increase in current liability. This is the amount. This is plus E. And then F is less, that means decrease in current liability and increase in current assets. The final amount is F, and that is to be subtracted. What you arrive at after doing the sum of these three items comes here. This is called cash generated from operations. I repeat, this is called cash generated from operations. This is actually, in most of the questions, your final answer of operating activity. You will write it as cash generated from operation only when you have item like tax paid given in your question. Otherwise, this itself becomes cash flow from operating activity. Then you need to subtract any tax paid. Any tax paid in your question should be subtracted. So tax paid is subtracted from cash generated from operations, and finally what you arrive at is called cash flow from operating activities. You see here, this is the final answer. Cash flow from operating activity, children. I'm sorry I said financing. So this is your first answer, cash flow from operating activity, and this has two important words, from and used. When your answer is positive, you will be write cash flow, cash flow from operating activity. And when your answer is negative, you will write cash used in operating activities. So that is to be taken care of. Positive answer makes it cash flow, and negative answer makes it cash use. And this is the first answer. I mean, this should be your final answer of operating activity. But if tax paid is not given here, then this cash generated from operation will be directly known as cash flow from operating activity. Only if tax paid is there, you have to subtract it and write this heading. So that completes the area of operating activity. Then I've already told you about investing activity. Investing activity final amount after doing all inside calculation. This is the final amount, and this is also your word which is used as cash flow or used. If you're investing activities, if you're investing If your investing activity is positive, you will write cash flow from investing activity. You can see here cash flow from investing activity, this is the amount, and if it is negative, you will write cash used in investing activities. Then comes the third activity, that is financing activity. So after writing down all the hits under financing activity, here you get the final amount of financing activity, which is positive figure cash flow and negative figure cash used in, and this is your final amount of financing activity. Then point number 4 I've already discussed. You will do the sum of three activities and you will write net increase or decrease. Then you will add the opening cash balance, that means cash and cash equivalents in the beginning of the year. And the final amount which will come here is your cash and cash equivalent at the end of the year. This is about the format of your cash flow statement to understand it under various activities mentioned: operating, investing, and financing. Hope this has been understood by you. So take care of this, understand it properly, and the first important thing is please note down this format in your copy, at least with the headings and subheadings which we have talked about. You may skip writing this all examples given inside because this is already in book, but write down point number 1, cash flow from operating activity. Then you write down items to be added, that is non-operating non-cash items, items to be subtracted, that is non-operating incomes. Then point number D, operating profit before working capital changes should come in your copy. Then you should write down this, add increase in current liability, decrease in current assets. Then next you should write down cash generated from operation, sorry, you should write down subtract increase in current assets and decrease in current liabilities. Then cash generated from operations less income tax, and finally cash flow or use from operating activity, which is your first activity final answer. Then you move with Roman 2, cash flow from investing activities. Then write down number 3, cash flow from financing activities. Point number 4, net increase slash decrease in cash and cash equivalents from 1 plus 2 plus 3. Then point number 5, add cash and cash equivalents in the beginning of the year. And finally, your last subheading in the statement, point number 6, cash and cash equivalents at the end of the year. The final amount should be closed with double line. This is not to be forgotten. So children, take care of this. Write this format with at least the subheadings which I've discussed just now. This is given in your textbook, and all rest area we will discuss with online class where we will do our questions, because the detail we have already talked about. So this brings an end to today's class. Do your task of writing this cash flow statement in your copy. Thank you. Take care. Have a very nice day. God bless you all.